Hi there, I'm Leslie McCormick. I'm a licensed professional counselor with a master's degree in somatic counseling psychology and a registered dance movement therapist. And this video is to show you how to move through the freeze response, which is one of 4 or 5 different ways of responding, natural ways that our bodies, that our nervous systems respond to overwhelming threat. And so in this video, I'm just going to take you through some very simple movements, which done with mindfulness or presence can really help the body and the brain to kind of reset and to understand that you're actually now in a moment of safety or relative safety and security. What tends to happen is that our bodies respond automatically to a stimulus, which can be outside of ourselves or inside of ourselves, actually. And we can kind of get locked in these patterns of, in this case, freeze, which exists along a continuum. So whether we're talking about the fight response, the flee response, freeze, faint, / dissociate, or the cry for help, we can actually exist on a continuum. So it doesn't mean that you have to be in a 100% freeze response for this video or for these techniques to be helpful to you. So with a freeze response, what happens is that our bodies, the way that we are going into a natural protective state is it's an unconscious way or an automatic way for us to kind of try to be invisible. So if you think about it, if we're really, really still, and I'm exaggerating my eyes and my muscle tone, if we're very, very still, including holding the breath, we might not be seen. So on an evolutionary level, what happens when we are very, very still is that the predator might not see us. And even though we're very sophisticated, quote unquote, civilized beings at this point in time, our hardware is still the same, as I've explained in my previous videos. And so what ends up happening is that we, without even knowing it sometimes, when we are in a situation of acute stress or threat, or even chronic stress or threat, we tend to go into this state of making ourselves smaller, becoming very, very still, holding the breath, and even keeping the eyes relatively stationary. Okay, so even just taking this on, embodying this, for me, I start to feel that freeze. So as you can see, and I'm going to invite you to just go through these movements with me. I relax my body. One of the first things that I do and that I really recommend is just notice that what's happening with the breath. Notice that the breath is held. And I'll just pause there, and you can breathe with me a couple of times. So when we're in the freeze state, it can feel scary even to take a deeper breath. This is oftentimes when we have experienced pretty extreme trauma in our youth, or even as an adult, if the trauma is really extreme, it can really feel like even taking a deep breath is risky, because as you see, when I do that, you can actually see my body move, and that would be a sign to the predator, there's someone there, or there's something there, and that thing is alive. And so we're just trying to make ourselves very still. So the first thing to kind of unlock that freeze response is just taking a slightly deeper breath, or a bigger, even deeper breath. I had my hand here and I had my hand here, and the reason for that is sometimes when it feels scary to take a deeper breath, it can feel safer to have a little barrier between ourselves and what's out there. So it can be a little bit easier to start to breathe deeper if our hands are protecting our viscera. You can even put a hand down here on the belly. and protecting the general area of the heart. You can just see how that starts to immediately, for me, it starts to soften my gaze, taking what's called a diaphragmatic breath. And then I want to kind of release my mouth and my soft palate. Start to feel a difference there. The soft palate is if you put your tongue right on the roof of your mouth. That's your hard palate. And right behind that, you might be able to feel it with the back of your tongue. There's the soft palate. Now we can soften the eyes and soften the soft palate. And then we want to be able to just bring in a little bit of movement. And I'm going to give you 2 or 3 initial options here. One is orienting. So that is when we move our eyes, our head, and our neck. And I really prefer the full movement with this somatic technique. It's not just moving the eyes. You can see how with that, I can still really be in freeze, right? But our orienting architecture, that really helps us to reset and know whether in fact we do need to run or we do need to, go into some other protective mode, whether that's necessary or not. So for example, if I hear a loud noise, and we just kind of automatically orient to that loud noise. If, my dog goes through the door there and it makes a loud noise and I'm not familiar with that sound, I'm going to orient to it. I'm really going to look with my eyes, my head, and I'm going to turn my neck and even maybe twist my upper body to look and see what happened. It's just natural what we do. And then once we determine, oh, okay, everything's fine over there, then naturally our bodies begin to relax. But when we've had a lot of trauma, for instance, or it's not clear that the coast is clear, our bodies can really stay in this intense or tense state. So when we sequence the freeze response, we kind of take that backward. We're in a freeze, even though we might be safe or safe enough in our present moment context. So we can really use that. We can look, we can turn and really see, see what's around you. You can look and spot something in particular, maybe even something that you find beautiful, so turning and looking and, oh, that tree over there, I'm really seeing a tree. And you can look for particular colors and textures and just kind of name them to yourself. So looking over here, I'm going to give myself the task of finding 5 things that are black in color. Okay, so I found 5 things that are black in color, and maybe I give myself the task of finding 4 things that have curving lines. Okay. And so on. You can invent all kinds of different things, but the point is that you're really seeing what's in your environment. It really helps your brain to reset because it knows, oh, I'm here now in this space, and actually it's okay, I'm not in danger in this moment. So breathing deeper, turning and looking and orienting, and you can do both sides maybe. And feel free to even move, you spin a circle or move off of center a little bit. Sometimes turning and looking can feel a bit much if you're in a very deep freeze. And in that case, sometimes what I like to recommend is just a little kind of serpentine movement. I really like this one. I feel like it starts to get me in a little bit more of a playful zone too. So just kind of starting to dip the head and letting the rest of the body follow. It's a little serpentine movement. I'm going to stay away from the other S word in case there are people watching with a phobia. And you can do just a tiny version of this too. So You can just move your spine from side to side a little bit, or maybe just a little bit front to back. Just taking you out of that freeze state, and then maybe you can turn and look and orient a little bit. There's no one right way of doing this. You're gonna explore a little bit and see what works for you. As you can see, I'm keeping my hands here. That feels really good to me. It really helps me to breathe more deeply. It reminds me to take a deep breath, but it doesn't have to be that way, you know? And then for the last technique that I'm going to show you, it's just taking all that a little bit of a step further. It takes us into an area where it could almost start to get a little bit playful, but at least it's soft and it has gentle edges. And as you can see, I'm just kind of swaying back and forth a little bit. I'm moving my hips. It's quite soothing, right? We do this with babies for a reason. And we adults are no different. That stuff is very deeply programmed into our hardware. Yeah, so you can just give yourself a little rock, a little sway. And you might even, this is where it could start, you know, it can start to become a little playful. You can start to bring in a little bit of front to back movement or movement on the sagittal plane. You can even let your arms swing. Just easy. Again, there's no right and wrong. You can kind of let those arms be floppy if you like. And again, you can kind of pair this up with, you know, looking around. You're breathing, letting your breathing really be soft, natural, not holding it. Hi. Yeah, and we can start to make this even bigger. So I'm just taking this into a little bit of a swing, letting my weight. It's okay that you can't see my whole body in the video, but just kind of letting my weight drop. Really letting go the head at the bottom of the swing. And maybe you kind of play with it in the middle a little bit. Again, checking that you're not holding your breath. A good way of doing this is just by parting your lips or opening your mouth just a little bit. Oh, this one is always so good for me. Little swing. And also, and finally, just a little bounce. Also a really good way to just continue sequencing that freeze all the way through the body. You can bounce, you can jiggle. Especially the head, that's a really important thing. If we don't release the head, it's really hard to come all the way out of a freeze. And again, because the freeze response is on a continuum, it doesn't mean that we're always going to be, you know, fully in that freeze. It might just be that, you know, for days we've kind of been pulling our bodies inward, that there's kind of been this tension at core. Maybe our belly is tense. Maybe our breathing is shallow. So we're just inviting that belly to relax and open, and it can be a challenge for all kinds of reasons in a culture that tells us bellies are supposed to be flat or whatever. But, you know, really invite you to work with that a little bit. Can you really release your belly so it's soft? And you can combine these in lots of different ways. So you recognize this one, right? Not only do we, you know, sway with a baby, we bounce and sway together, and we can do this for ourselves too. Works like a charm. It's great. Okay. So I hope those simple somatic techniques are going to be really helpful to you in, you know, whether you're anxious about the election or kind of in a more of a freeze state because of what's going on in our culture and in the United States, politically speaking, or whether, you just have personal things going on that bring a lot of anxiety. This can be really helpful to get back into the body in a way that feels really good and that helps us to start to release. It's very different than hitting the gym and, pounding the weights, which can also be really helpful, but we want to be kind of strategic and intelligent about the interventions, what interventions we use, when and why. And one of the big things with this, you can probably feel it as you join me, if you did join me, and that is that we want to be just really present in the movement. We want to feel what's going on, and that's part of the pacing of it and the speed. Is we want to be in mindfulness. We want to experience what's happening. Without that, if we're just doing rote movements, right, nothing's going to change in the brain. It's really that mindfulness, that presence, that helps the nervous system to recalibrate. So again, hope that was helpful. I'll just say a couple more things. That there is a rocking chair behind me. And so sometimes it can be really helpful to just move to a rocking chair, or I also keep those exercise balls or physio balls around, and I keep them around not so much for exercise, but because this is a really nice way in a seated position, either on a rocking chair or a physio ball, to just start to again sequence that freeze response. Just, you can imagine sitting on a ball and rocking back and forth, or side to side, or bouncing. They're really good for bouncing on those physio balls. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about here, because I'm a meditator and because I feel really strongly about meditation as a transformative power in our lives, I'll put it that way for now, that a lot of times when we're taught meditation, if we're not aware, or maybe the instructor isn't aware, we can actually really recreate or recapitulate that freeze response. So a lot of people associate meditation with being super still, and even some forms of meditation are taught that way, where you do get very still, and it's a very held still position. That isn't necessarily the original instruction, but it can come down the line that way sometimes. And even if it doesn't, even if the instructor is like, you can move, it's okay, sometimes we still kind of go into this this mode, which is like, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to do it. And the good boy or the good girl, the good kid kind of paradigm often shows up as a freeze in the body. And so it's really important that we feel like when we're in seated meditation that it is okay to move, and just bringing in, even just bringing in a little bit of movement in the spine, checking in and taking a little bit of a deeper breath. I always kind of, sometimes my head kind of tilts up a little bit, or sometimes down like this. And I just kind of am making sure that this area is open so that I'm breathing freely and that my head isn't kind of in a freeze in some way. But we can just bring in tiny little movements that help us to really stay embodied in meditation and really stay in the optimal physiological place for deepening meditation and transformative meditation. So, having our full breath available to us, and again, not feeling like I'm holding this position. What ends up happening naturally as our meditation progresses, as it deepens, is we come to what I like to call an arrived at stillness. So if we're gentle with ourselves and we're tracking, if we are somebody with, like me, have this natural freeze response that happens a lot, if we give ourselves that period of time in the beginning of a sit to, move just a little bit, to do what we need to do for our bodies, to not go into that freeze, what ends up happening is that the body and mind start calming together. And then there's a real stillness that arrives, and I'm not imposing it, and it's not a frozen stillness, it's a soft stillness, and it's alert, but it's not a high activate in terms of the nervous system. It's not a high activation state, and it doesn't kind of perpetuate a certain not only physiological state, but even sense of myself, which is a narrow sense of myself. And in meditation, what I'm going for is expanding that sense of self, which really helps me to do when I soften my body and allow a little movement at the beginning. But then again, just to restate that an arrived at stillness has a very different feel in the body and the mind than an imposed stillness. So I hope that's helpful for your anxiety, for your freeze responses, your tension, your stress, but also perhaps if you're a meditator, just a little bit of nuanced support around how working with the body in this way in the beginning stages of meditation can really, I almost don't want to say advance your meditation, but really help to open it in an organic way. So may you be well, may you be happy, and I hope this was helpful.